Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to continue our NFL predictions with the Las Vegas Raiders. And this was kind of a season where I said, told you so. If you don't remember last year on my predictions, I wasn't high on the chart on the Raiders, more so because who was that coach? Josh McDaniels. I don't trust Josh McDaniels, let alone I don't even trust that organization. In fact, the Raiders, I don't even know why I'm saying the Chargers so much in this video. The Raiders, they've actually regressed under McDaniels, an actual head coach over an interim head coach. You should have kept Rich Bisaccia, Raiders. And as a result, they've had a pretty bad year and a very sour way to end that year. Like, look at their schedule. They started off 1-4, only getting a win against the Broncos, and I'll admit, they got screwed over against the Chiefs on Monday night. If you know, you know. Then they got a easy win over the Texans. Then lost 3 straight to the Saints, Jaguars, where they had a fourth quarter lead, and the Colts, where I believe they had a fourth quarter lead. Then they ripped off 3 wins straight, beating the Broncos, getting into a shootout with the Seahawks, of all teams, and beating the Chargers again. And then they fluked, and then after losing to the Rams, where they had a fourth quarter lead with like a little over a minute, allowed Baker Mayfield to drive down the field and score a touchdown, they got a fluke win over New England. And I honestly still to this day don't know how the Raiders won that game. But they ended their season on a sour note, losing their last 3. And the only reason Josh McDaniels didn't get fired was because the Raiders are one of the poorest teams in the NFL, and that buyout was going to be too expensive for them to have. Well, let's take a look at some highlights, and there actually is a few for the Raiders. For one, we have the Josh Jacobs rebirth. The Raiders are idiots for not giving him his 5th-year option. So now they realize they're gonna have to pay him. So instead, they gave him the franchise tag. Not a smart move, Raiders. But yeah, Josh Jacobs, he had a bit of a rebirth year. And I think the climax of that year was his game-winning 80-plus yard touchdown run to beat the Seahawks. Then there's Davante Adams. He's Davante Adams, still one of the best receivers in the league. I ain't got much to say. And then they swept the Broncos, which normally I usually give the usually I let them split this series, but for the second year in a row, Josh McDaniels beat his former team. I will give him credit for that. Now for the lowlights. One, they got shut out by the Saints. That game was very bad for the Raiders. They didn't even cross midfield until late in the fourth quarter, in garbage time, when the game was already won. And given the fact that you have Josh Jacobs, Davante Adams, Derek Carr on your offense, and you managed to score 0 points against the Saints, that's not a good look. And then losing to the Colts. This was probably the most humiliating loss in this entire season any team has had. Because I think weeks prior, Jeff Saturday said something like, the Raiders are trash. His first game as an interim head coach was against the Raiders. Josh McDaniels had a chance to silence Jeff Saturday, but instead, the Colts somehow won that game. Raiders. And then, pretty much the biggest low light of this entire season, blaming Derek Carr for losing. They blamed him pretty much for losing against the Steelers, and after that Steeler game, Josh McDaniels benched him in favor of his guy, Jarrett Stidham, and for one game he did play well, but it resulted in an L, and then the next game he didn't even play well at all against the Chiefs. But really blaming Derek Carr for why this team's been losing, when you could look at the defense, which tried to make acquisition after acquisition and still be bad, it really shows you how much of a hack Josh McDaniels is. On to their free agent acquisitions. They got the guy, and for who they added, they got the guy who helped them win a game against New England. They added Jimmy Garoppolo, who's the most, for now, they have Jimmy Garoppolo. And the only reason I say for now is because he has yet to clear his physical, given that he's coming off a foot injury. And they said if he fails his physical, the signing could be null and void, and the Raiders will be stuck without a quarterback. You know how funny that would be? And also to replace Darren Waller, they added Austin Hooper. And subtractions, obviously the most notable was Derek Carr and Darren Waller. And given the fact that Darren Waller just recently married a WNBA player who plays for the Las Vegas Aces, and Josh McDaniels traded him almost like a week after, yeah. If that marriage fails, I'm blaming Josh McDaniels for it. And for the draft, well, at least they didn't reach this year. I mean, they took Tyree Wilson, a defensive end from Texas Tech, even though they already have Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. Let's be real, Chandler Jones is on the downswing anyway. But in the second round, they added Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. I feel like that's a really good pick for the Raiders. But other than that, not much notable here. Although they did take a quarterback from Purdue named Aiden O'Connell. But how will the Raiders do this year? Let's take a look. Okay, Raiders, let's take a look. And we're going to start off with, they start their season off with the Denver Broncos. I went ahead and gave the Broncos a home win. And then against the Bills, I'm giving them a loss here because it's in Buffalo. It's their first home game. It happens. But against the Pittsburgh Steelers, I do get them getting their first win will come against the Steelers. And the only reason I have that happening is because usually when the Steelers go to the Raiders, at least back when they went to Oakland, they tend to do terrible there. And most of the times, the Raiders' quarterback play be suspect. But week 4 against the Chargers, I have them losing to the Chargers. I have them losing to the Packers. Do the Patriots get their revenge? I don't know. This one's another one of those toss-up games. I'm actually gonna go with the Raiders getting a second win. I think their second win will come against New England. But then they have New York. Then they have the Bears and Lions, which I went ahead and gave them losses. Then for the Giants, I know this is another one of those tricky games, but I'm gonna go with the Giants for this one. And for some reason, I'm at the Raiders beating the Jets. Then we have them going to Miami to take on the Dolphins. Give me the Dolphins. Then they got their kryptonite in the Chiefs. Yeah, I think y'all know what I picked. Then we have the Minnesota Vikings. And this is another one of those games that I went back and forth on. Because at this point, Raider record not good. And you know that probably at this point, Josh McDaniels will probably be fired at this point. But Minnesota is another team I'm not that high on this year. And because of that, I'm actually gonna give Minnesota the road win. Then I got them losing to the Chargers again for some reason. Losing to the Chiefs on Christmas Day in ugly fashion. And then the game against the Colts. I'm gonna go with the Colts in this one. And then I got them beating the Broncos week 18. Which gives them a record of 4-13. I think the Raiders 4-13. A lot of people are hyping up this team. I'm just not buying it. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below what record you think the Raiders are going to have. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.